Greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. Welcome to this, the second time I've ever gone live on YouTube. This is a Robservations live stream on a Sunday morning as I wait for the Seattle Seahawks to trounce the San Francisco 49ers. I don't know if you guys are football fans. You know, it's I'm a fan of the Jedi Knights of the Pacific Northwest, the Seattle Seahawks. And I'm taking off my headphones because I'm getting an echo. I don't know why. But anyway, I wanted to talk to you guys. I thought it was sort of important for me to discuss this whole idea of social justice warriors and Marvel's Captain Marvel. And there's a lot of people out there that are asking me this question, like, what do you think about social justice warriors and Captain Marvel and blah, 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 blah. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of listening to people talk about that films about established characters that have been around for decades. When they decide to finally get around to make a movie that stars a female protagonist, that it's somehow an answer to calls for social justice. I mean, I first encountered the character of Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, back in Avengers Annual 10, which came out in 1981. And in that, Michael Golden famously drew that comic. And it's a great comic. The art's incredible. But Rogue is introduced and steals Carol Danvers' powers. And I love the character from that moment on. And I just find it really interesting that we now live in a world where when somebody decides to make a feature film about a female protagonist, that it somehow has a political connotation to it. It doesn't have a political connotation to it. It has a money connotation to it. Half the world's population, if not a little bit more than half, are female. Wonder Woman proved that a female superhero would be consumed by all audiences. Hollywood is not catering to a certain political bent when they're making movies about characters that are previously existing. What they're catering to is their wallets. They're hoping that they're going to make a lot of money. Wonder Woman is a beloved character. Obviously, it showed that there's an audience, a four-quadrant audience of young, old, moms, dads, husbands, wives, daughters, sons. Everybody wants to see a good film. And that's what the Hollywood studios are trying to do. They're trying to make movies that will be consumed by as many people as possible. So, look, I want Captain Marvel to be great. I'm really looking forward to seeing it. I never think of it as, oh, it's the first lead female protagonist in a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. I understand how some people can think of it that way, but I don't. I mean, to me, it's just a natural progression. I'm kind of... You know, the main Marvel pantheon began as men, as all superheroes sort of they sprung out of the imaginations of young boys. Even Wonder Woman was created by a dude, you know, and I just don't see that there's a political connotation as to whether or not a female protagonist is going to be in a movie. Look, what I want is a great story. I want great characters. I want a great script. I want a great story that serves those characters. But you also have to remember, for all the people that are crying social justice, you know, if you grew up as part of a group of people that were marginalized in some way, African Americans to this day have never achieved any kind of parity in our culture. There has never been true freedom, as much as you want to say, oh, on the books. Not really. African Americans, Black America knows that they have yet to ever be treated 100% fairly in this country. And they certainly haven't been when it comes to the amount of representation that they've seen over the last 100 years plus in motion pictures. So when a movie like Black Panther comes out, the fact that it had such a great cast of characters, great, I mean, all the great African American actors, you couldn't stuff any more practically in there. What's important about that film is not that it's a good superhero movie, because that's important, or that it's a great MCU film, but the fact that you have a film that isn't about Black characters being Black per se. They just are. Those characters, Wakanda happens to be in Africa, the same way New York City happens to be in the United States. So when a movie like Black Panther comes out, And it isn't necessarily, sure, people are going to say, well, it's about race. By definition, it has to be about race. Yeah, but the story really wasn't about race. The story was about characters from Wakanda, which is a nation on the continent of Africa. The fact that the racial makeup of those characters happen to be what it is not really part of that story. But in the larger universe, in the world that we live in, the fact that there's this kind of representation, that it's matter of fact, that Black Panther was presented to the world the same way that Captain America, Thor, Thor's about Asgard. That's a different land with different people. When Kate Blanchett shows up as Hela, it's not like people were complaining and screaming that, oh, they just put Hela in the movie because it's because of social justice. No, it's not. She's a kick-ass character. They made changes. Kate Blanchett played her to the hilt. And, sometimes, as Roger Ebert said, I think he said a kiss is just a kiss. And, I mean, why don't we all get excited that Marvel has made a Captain Marvel movie? I'm excited about that. I don't know if it's going to be good or bad. They've got a pretty good track record. So whether, you're talking about Rey, I don't understand people, Rey in The Last Jedi or Rey in the new trilogy. Princess Leia was always a kick-ass character. In Star Wars, she grabs a stormtrooper blaster and takes it out of Luke's arms and basically rescues herself. Today, if Star Wars had come out, somebody would have said, Princess Leia is a social justice warrior. Well, aren't we all in some way? I mean, isn't the entirety of Star Wars about social justice warriors that are trying to free the galaxy from the tyranny of the Galactic Empire? I don't know. That's just kind of what I was thinking this morning. And since people seem to like my live stream yesterday, I figured, why not do it again? Because I want to sort of get people to come to this channel. I've got a lot of content that's sort of in the chamber that I'm finishing up, all kinds of weird content. But you're going to see it, and I'm going to put it up, and I hope you guys enjoy it. So, I think when you're thinking about social justice warriors or how that affects what movies are getting made, I really don't think that's part of it. What they're trying to do is serve an audience. Of course, half the world's population are women. Let's give them another female superhero, and let's give me another female superhero because I want to watch Brie Larson, who's a great actor. Let's wait till we see the movie before we pillory it and destroy it on the internet, because at least wait till you've seen something. I'm already seeing the divisive nature of, which I knew, of Aquaman opinions coming from all over the place. But, as somebody who grew up watching Ray Harryhausen stop motion animation movies, I loved Aquaman. So that's all I wanted to say, just to get it off my mind, because people have been asking me this morning about Captain Marvel and social justice warriors. And I'm like, look, the people that terrify me the most are on my side of the aisle, the people that I would consider to be left-wing progressives. I mean, they're going to come after half of my movie collection at some point because it's going to be deemed offensive to somebody, whether it's A Clockwork Orange, whether it's Last House on the Left. I mean, it scares me to death. What we need is an educated, smart population that understands that there's been 1,000 years, 10,000 years of human history and human literature and human movies and human art, that we can't just decide something that was created 1,000 years ago is now bad because of the way we feel about things today. That's what scares me. So let's go to your questions. What do you have to say? I came to talk to you guys. Hi, Rob. Hello from Italy. Claude says hello from Italy. Hello, Claude. I hope you have a 4K disc player and you got the great Italian 4K and Blu-ray set of Dawn of the Dead. I know it's only the Argento cut of Dawn of the Dead, but still, it's Dawn of the Dead in 4K, and it's awesome. And I got it from Amazon Italy. God bless Amazon Italy. I also got The Last Emperor, Bertolucci's The Last Emperor, in 3D, because the only place you could get it was from Italy. So that's cool. The Star Trek, I can't say Erie. I can't say. Well, I have your great T-shirt. I should be wearing your T-shirt. I'm sorry, I'm wearing another green T-shirt. Ireland represent. Kilkenny. Somebody, why can't I get Kilkenny, the cream of Ireland? It's made by Guinness. You can't find it in LA. Really bothers me. What's up, Robbie? Rocky Persinger says, "What up, Rob? Really enjoy your Everyone Has a Story message." Well, you know what? Everybody does have a story. I'm glad a lot of people wrote me about that. I honestly believe that. I believe that everybody does have a story to tell, and they're worth listening to, and they're worth learning from. The really sad part is that many people don't believe that they have a story to tell because no one's ever asked them to tell one. And I think that's what we need more of. We need more of people seeking out the stories of others, whether they're your neighbors or whether they're your friends or whether people you've just met, the teller at the bank, the person who serves you the smoothie every day, your favorite barista, or the homeless guy you pass on the street every day. Everybody has a story to tell. And I think a lot of people just have never been asked to tell stories, so they don't even realize that they have value. They carry around with them every day, and they just don't know that they do. Stubble McShave, Hollywood still struggles with the paragon sexism, racism. That means that instead of creating well-rounded characters of minorities, they have one uber person in that minority. I tend to agree with that, but I think that's changing. We're seeing that. Look, America has always had a problem with race. We still have a problem with race in this country, but we're seeing a lot more representation of different kinds of people. But again, if it's successful, it'll make money. They'll keep making those things. And I've always loved stories about different ethnic backgrounds or different kinds of. I mean, I've watched movies. It's very weird when I hear people talk about there's not enough representation. Like Crazy Rich Asians was such a breakthrough for Asian Americans, and I'm thinking to myself, really, let's watch a bunch of rich people just because they're Asians, they're rich. I mean, I've been watching Asian cinema since I was a kid. And whether it was Chow Yun-fat or Tony Leung or Maggie Q or I've always loved Asian cinema. So in my mind, more people should watch Asian cinema, not expect Americans to make movies that have more Asians in them, although that's a good thing. But the Asian film industry is one of the richest in the world. Kurosawa, if you go back far, I mean, since the dawn of cinema, every country, Russia, India, the Asian countries, there's been so many great movies made all over the world for 100 years. And it's, you just have to watch them, go out and get these movies. I can't recommend highly enough going out and finding great foreign cinema because there's some incredible stuff. There's a movie called The World of Kaneko. You can get it on Blu-ray. It's like a Japanese Quentin Tarantino movie about this burnt out alcoholic cop that finds out his young daughter who's disappeared is not what she appears to be. And she might be really, really bad. It's a great movie. I can't recommend it highly enough. World of Kaneko. Get it. Love it. Jake Damon asks, I'm just getting into Star Trek. I'm up to TOS episode 1, episode 15, and I'm loving it. I wanted to ask you what you thought of the Corbomite maneuver. I was kind of blown away by Kirk's poker play against Baylock. The Corbomite maneuver, Jake, is, to my mind, the quintessential episode of Star Trek. It has an incredible dilemma. It's a first contact story. It's a story where everything turns out to not be what it seems initially. And it has a great Kirk ploy when the titular Corbomite maneuver is a great moment in Star Trek history. And by the way, Corbomite plays on later in the series. That comes back into play. But to me, the first season of Star Trek is Star Trek. You can love Star Trek: The Next Generation, Star Trek: Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, and Enterprise, and the animated series, and now Discovery. But what Star Trek is at its essence is the original series. Everything else is just a derivation on a theme. So I'm glad that you dig that episode. It's great. Great episode. David McIntosh says hello from Scotland, drinking a whiskey and enjoying the live streams. Well, I appreciate that. We're dry here in this house. Not all the time, just today. There's not a lick of alcohol. So unfortunately, I'm just drinking some nice filtered tap water. But in my Game of Thrones glass. So yes. So cheers. I wish I had a whiskey. Does America? Brinsley says, does America not watch foreign films? Not nearly enough. I would say half of my, maybe not half, maybe a quarter of my Blu-ray collection are from other countries or foreign films. I mean, they were manufactured here, but they are foreign films in many different languages. I don't make any distinction between what language a film is in. I always want to see them subtitled. But yeah, Americans don't. We just don't watch foreign films. And I understand watching a movie with subtitles is difficult because you're missing the visual thrill of what cinema is. But I can't recommend watching foreign films more. I mean, one of my favorite movies of all time is a French film that is called Amélie. It's a magical realist film. It's just a wonderful, whimsical romance, and it's really about how one person can change their entire community for the better. Captain Robert April, by the way, Captain Robert April, you should tune into our Star Trek podcast, Inglorious Treksperts. The new episode, which goes online today, is about the Star Trek animated series, which in my mind made Captain Robert April canon to Star Trek. Let's see. Vesna, how are you? Bosnia, are you from Bosnia? Actually, I'll tell you something. One of my favorite movies of all time is a Yugoslavian film. It's in Serbo-Croatian, and in America, it's called Hey Baba Reba. I don't know what the title is, the original Yugoslavian title is, but it's certainly not Hey Baba Reba. Hey Baba Reba is a song. It's great. She asks, will I be doing a special show about filming The Lord of the Rings, since next year will be the 20th anniversary of the start of filming? Well, she is correct. My team, I work with a company called Curdy Pellerin, Michael Pellerin and Jeff Curdy's company. Jeff Curdy just wrote a book about Mary Poppins that just came out. He's also from Seattle. I worked on the extended edition special features. So for a couple of years of my life, I did nothing but immerse myself into the world of Middle Earth. I was able to I got to go to London and interview Christopher Lee for 5 hours. I interviewed John Rhys-Davies. It was a highlight of my life. I went and lived in New Zealand for months at a time. It was incredible. I'll tell you, it was so great. Like, there was one day where they were shooting the bigatures. It was the model shop where they had the bigatures. And they were shooting a fell beast point of view shot diving through Minas Tirith, the White City. And this camera was on this. It was a snorkel lens. It was going click, click, click. It was a single frame camera. And I sat there for an hour and just watched this camera move slowly through the city, one of the streets. And there was a bridge, a miniature bridge. And the camera, it's on a snorkel lens. And here's this bridge and the camera's coming down. And I'm like, looking around, there's like nobody around. I'm like, well, is the camera going to hit the bridge? And literally, right as the camera went up and hit the bridge, somebody from behind me that I didn't know where they came from just whooshed by, picked up the bridge. The camera came by, and then they came back around and put the bridge back into place. I mean, these people were magicians. Everybody that worked at Weta Workshop and Weta Digital, they were just going there was like going to what I would imagine Santa's workshop was when I was like 4 years old. It was incredible. Stubble McShave says, my favorite Star Trek movie is First Contact. My favorite Star Trek movie is Star Trek, the motion picture. I know a lot of people, that's a controversial point of view, but there's so many reasons why I could get into why I love that movie so much. But to me, it expanded the Star Trek universe and made space truly mysterious and wondrous and amazing. And the scope that Star Trek was given was truly big screen. First Contact had that kind of scope, but the classic Star Trek films with the classic cast they were made with smaller budgets, and nothing ever instilled in me a sense of wonder the way Star Trek the Motion Picture did. Question, part 1 of 2. Also, Jake Damon asks, in The Enemy Within, they don't want to beam up the crew from Alpha 177 in case the transporter creates more duplicates. Isn't that a lame reason not to save Sulu and company from freezing to death in 120-degree weather? Why not just tie up the duplicates? Well, the problem is the people that they didn't know. First of all, they didn't know there were duplicates at the beginning. They just knew there was a problem with they didn't realize how it all worked. But people were dying. I mean, and they couldn't put them, because that poor little dog, they couldn't fuse people back together. So, I mean, the real question is, why didn't they take a shuttlecraft down and rescue Sulu? They didn't have a shuttlecraft yet, but or maybe they did because the Galileo 7 came later. But yes, that's always been a point that we talk about. Haskell 420 says, hi, Robert. We all miss Schnepp, John Schnepp, the great John Schnepp, so much. Absolutely. His loss was tragic for the world. What did you learn from Schnepp working with and knowing him? You know what? He didn't change my opinion, but you know what I loved about John? John loved the creativity of others. What somebody else was doing, it didn't matter what it was. John was delighted by the creativity of others. He was never threatened by it. he reveled in anything anybody else did that was creative, whether it was sculpting, drawing, making movies. In Hollywood, everybody's always bad mouthing everybody else. John Schnepp just loved people's creative endeavors, and in that, I think that's why we were friends for so long. Because before I did Heroes with him, starting in 2015, he and I would always run into each other at different events because we were both sweaties. I mean, I hung out with him in New York back in 2009 one time, and I mean, I'd go visit him at Titmouse when he was working on Metalocalypse. And John Schnepp was a guy that he just loved other people's creativity. It fueled his own desire to create things on his own, and he never had a bad word to say about people. He might not have liked everybody, but he loved their creative impulse, and I thought that was a great way to live. Bill Hunt says, the sadder thing that we have to live with a new generation of studio executives in charge of film and home video that aren't interested in film as art anymore. Well, Bill's absolutely right. I mean, I watch it in my own career. I started making DVD special features in 2000. I worked on my own film, Free Enterprise, and then I worked on the first release of Fantasia on DVD, and then The Emperor's New Groove for Disney. Those are the first two things that I'd worked on with special features. And now, and we all considered ourselves auteurs. Like we considered special features filmmaking in its own right. It was something that we really prided ourselves on, and we tried to be innovative and create. Even though they were documentaries, we created movies. If any of you have the Superman Returns Blu-ray or DVD, I did a 3-hour documentary that took me 2 years to make on the making of Superman Returns, and I worked on that with Adam Robitel. I was in Australia for a year with Brian Singer and Adam Robitel, who has Escape Room coming out next month, so everybody go see Robitel's Escape Room. But we filmed every day, and it was incredible. But the amount of money that they were giving us to do these things, you're never going to see that anymore. Batman89 says, hi, Robert. You and Schnepp got me into comics on Heroes. Thanks, man. Reading Ghost Rider, Sirens of Kronos. It's enjoyable. Yes. I was always a Ghost Rider fan. Even back into the 70s, I discovered Ghost Rider when I was a kid in the 70s. And I just never felt Ghost Rider got his due in comics. What he needed was like Ghost Rider Year One. He needed Frank Miller to come in and do something. Captain Robert Abel, Roddenberry generally said they couldn't afford the shuttlecraft yet. That's what Robert Abel says. Yes, it's true. You know why they got the full-size shuttlecraft in the original series was because AMT, the model kit company that manufactured the Enterprise models, they paid for the full-scale AMT shuttle. The AMT paid for the full-scale shuttlecraft to be built that they could use in the Galileo 7 or Journey to Babel, because they wanted the to be able to make the model kit of the shuttlecraft. So that's where it came from. Daniel Yamas says, like others in this chat, you and Schnepp got me into comics from your Hero show. That's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that. I get that a lot. I think it's great. No one would have liked that more than John Schnepp. He was a big proponent, as you all know, of comic book stores and comic books in general and comic book art. The guy was one of a kind. We're never going to see the likes of him again. I was happy to know him. Stubborn Shave asks, do I look forward to Stan and Ollie? It sits at 93% on Rotten Tomatoes. It looks fantastic. Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy, of course, one of the great comedy duos of all time. Surprisingly, I came to their movies fairly late in life, and they're really good. I mean, I guess it shouldn't be surprising, but yes, what's going to be really interesting, I'm hoping, from that movie, not only does the movie look fantastic, but I hope a whole new generation of people discover Laurel and Hardy movies. The same is true of the Marx Brothers. I don't know why that always pops into my head, but Marx Brothers movies as well. Awesome words about Ben Bamboo says, awesome words about John. Thanks for sharing, Rob. Well, thank you. They're heartfelt. Hands of Stone. Does it bother you that except for the motion picture and the Voyage Home, they can't seem to make a Star Trek film without a main villain? Yes. Look, I've always maintained that Star Trek has never had bad guys or big bads. They've only had antagonists. And one of the lessons they've taken away from Space Seed, which is the wrong lesson, is that they have to make these, they've turned Star Trek movies into these giant action fests, which ultimately are boring. Because Star Trek is about ideas, and I think they need to figure out a way to make a Star Trek movie where there's ideological differences, and it's the ideological divide that becomes the villain, so to speak. And that's what great science fiction is. I think that Star Trek, unfortunately, the last 10 years of Star Trek have really moved away from Star Trek's core tenets. Star Trek was always an allegorical show that dealt with issues of today within the prism of a science fiction, fantasy, action adventure context. And now it's all become Star Trek is emulating things that are other than Star Trek, which is weird. I also don't understand. There's so many great Star Trek novels, why they don't go back and adapt more of the novels. My upcoming episode of Robservations, I do an hour-long interview with Diane Duane, who is my favorite Star Trek novelist, and she's done a lot of tie-in fiction for other IPs, and she goes into great length about that. So I'm happy to share that with you. So which is great. Let's see what else. God, there's so many. It's great to have so many people here. Just watch Q Who on Star Trek TNG. Love the introduction. Also, Measure of Man. The writing for these episodes is so good. Yes. What was really interesting was when I was working on the Blu-ray special features, Q Who and the Measure of a Man were shown theatrically in 1,200 theaters across the United States. And Measure of a Man is the only, it's on the Blu-ray, it's the only extended episode of Star Trek that exists. We were able to get an earlier cut of the film from writer Melinda Snodgrass. She kept it on a VHS tape for 25 years. And we had access to the negatives, so CBS Digital recreated the extended version of Measure of a Man, and it's on the Blu-ray, and you should get that because the Blu-ray set's great. I spent 3 years of my life creating special features for the Star Trek The Next Generation Blu-rays. I'm very, very proud of the work we did. It was really great stuff, and hope you dig that. Bill Hunt asks again, what are your favorite modern non-Trek science fiction shows? Well, I'm really loving The Expanse. I think The Expanse is great. I love Game of Thrones. Friday Night Lights is one of my favorite TV series of all time. I love Friday Night Lights. There's so much great television. I loved Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul. There's just so many great television shows. But one of my favorite things is if you like Star Trek, there was TV miniseries. They used to have miniseries that were big events where they would be like, now we just think of them as a season of television. But there was a miniseries that came out that was based on James Clavell's novel Shogun. And Toshiro Mifune is in it. Richard Chamberlain, John Rhys-Davies, of course, Sala and Gimli is in it. And it's basically about an Englishman who gets shipwrecked in feudal Japan and has to deal with warring groups, factions, and samurai, swift samurai justice. It's one of my favorite things that's ever been on television. That and a BBC series from the 70s called I, Claudius, which you should all watch. It's about the Caesars. It's shot on videotape. A lot of people are like, oh, what is this? I can't watch this, but it's great. I, Claudius, Shogun, and also my dearly beloved The Winds of War from 1983. Great stuff. Gotta watch that. Let's see. Q is awesome. Yes, Q is awesome. Wellington Smithopolis says it's great to have you here. Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here. I didn't know I'd have so much fun doing these live chats. Unknown Trev, much love from Tacoma. You got me interested in The Sandman. It's my favorite comic of all time. It is my favorite comic of all time. I don't know if you know, but I'm from Seattle, and my grandparents had a furniture store in Seattle. They had Schoenfeld's furniture in Tacoma for almost a century. It's gone now. It's been gone for about 20 years. But yes, and my aunt and uncle, my 92-year-old and 97-year-old aunt and uncle still live in Tacoma, and my cousins still do too. Pass on Breaking Bad. Oh man, I did that for a long time. I didn't watch Breaking Bad till I bought on Blu-ray the 50-gallon drum of the whole series. Amazing stuff. I loved it. I loved it. Haskell 420 says we watched Shogun in 8th grade social studies back in the day. Yes, great. It is a great series, isn't it? I remember V being huge. It was a water cooler show. Totally. The first V miniseries, it was 2 nights, and then V: The Final Battle came back years later, and it was 3 nights. A sculpted leather art by Viking Bitch. My Kind of Woman, sculpted leather art by Viking Bitch. She says, I'm going to just assume you are the Viking Bitch, which is awesome. The Expanse is a seriously great sci-fi show. The proto-molecule is a great villain because you can't reason with it. Also, the swearing is everything. Yes. By the way, The Expanse is also literary sci-fi. It's based on a series of books that's up to 8 books. And I guess they're kind of doing a a novel a season. And I love the fact that there's a direction. They know where they're going. You really feel like, as with Game of Thrones, even though the books weren't finished, you still feel that the plotting is taking you somewhere, unlike Manifest, this NBC show I hate watch because I just want to see how they're going to write themselves out of the corner the whole premise painted them into. And the answer is they're not. They're not going to write themselves out. And I can't believe I still watch that show. But anyway, did you get to work with Ronald D. Moore on the TNG stuff? Yes. Both Brandon Braga and Ronald Moore were incredibly generous with their time when it came to the TNG Blu-rays. Not only did they sit for many, many hours of interviews and commentaries, but they really opened themselves up. They were very candid. Brandon got us to go to Rick Berman's house and interview Rick, and we did this great piece that's on the Enterprise Season 1 Blu-ray where Rick and Brandon basically talk to each other. It's like watching a therapy session with these two guys. It's good stuff. Robert April asked a question about the director's edition of the motion picture. Just how bad would it look to just take that version and transfer that to Blu-ray? It would look bad. It wouldn't. Upscaling would not. It doesn't look good. I think they need to go in and do a 4K remaster of the whole thing. You always have to go into the negatives. You got to get the negative back. Otherwise, it's not going to work. I just got the TNG Blu-ray. Mercer Create says, I just got the TNG Blu-rays and can't wait to see it. Where else? Where's the Reliance deflector? That is a great question. What he means by that is the Starfleet vessels have a usually a dish, whether it's round or whether it's oval shaped, which is a navigational deflector that in universe Star Trek canon, a navigational deflector sweeps aside things like micrometeorites or any kind of debris that a starship would smack into it, whether it's high impulse power or warp velocities. That's what that does. And of course, the Reliant had theirs removed. But I'd like to think that the weapons pod, even though it's where the rear firing torpedoes are, maybe the weapons pod is the emitter. But then you go, well, yeah, but then there's the Soyuz version of that. And where's the? Yes, it is a problem. I agree. Ray Doyle says, Robert, loving the live chats. Have you played any of the Metal Gear Solid games? Yes, I did. I don't remember which Metal Gear Solid game it was, but it was on my PlayStation 3. I don't remember, but it might have been about 10 years ago. It was the only Metal Gear Solid game I played all the way through, and I loved it. But it was a chore. It was definitely a commitment, and I felt like I wasn't up to snuff. But the creator of those games is a genius, and I saw a trailer for his new game that made me very interested. It looked really weird. Some demon, I don't know what it was, but it looks cool. I want to see it. Batman 89, have you got the Neo Hot Toys figure yet? No. As far as I know, it hasn't made it to American shores yet. I'm dying to get it. I have the old Metacom Neo and Trinity from Matrix Reloaded, but I'm dying to get that figure. It looks fantastic. Jason Creed, any tips for new writers when writing thrillers and suspense? Well, that's a really good question. I think what the most important thing is to know how your story ends. Know what your final twist, your final ending is, and reverse engineer your story. Look at a movie like Gone Girl, which I read that book, and the book was very the changing point of view was really interesting when you find out Amazing Amy isn't dead. I was like, wow. One of my favorite modern thrillers, Basic Instinct, is great. Body Heat is great. There's a lot of great noir films. Double Indemnity. Go back and look at these things and read. I read a lot of like the Bosch series that's on Amazon. I read a lot of the Michael Connelly books. There's a Dave Robichaux, the character of Dave Robichaux. They made Heaven's Prisoners, In the Electric Mist with Tommy Lee Jones. James Lee Burke has written the Dave Robichaux series. I love those. There's so many great noir series, but I've always thought, know where your ending is. Know where your twist or whatever, however you're going to resolve the mystery and work back from there. Because so often you watch these mystery stories that you're invested in, and then by the time you get to the end, you feel you've been betrayed. Kind of like Lost, even though it's a non sequitur. Link at Wild asks, are you looking forward to the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance? Hell yes. And they're doing it with puppets. The Dark Crystal came out in 1982, and it's a beloved film. It's a little bit of a slog now to get through. I think it's a beautiful movie to look at. But and it's a great, again, it's sort of a pseudo Lord of the Rings type story, but I really like it. It's very handsome to look at. I love the score. But I can't believe, I mean, it's one of those things that makes me go, we live in these amazing times that we're getting a Dark Crystal series from Henson. I mean, come on, who wouldn't be excited for that? That's so awesome. I can't believe it. Movie Finobi asks, have you encountered Derek Roberts in your travels? I have not. He seems like a down-to-earth creative guy. I hope The Boys is successful. He read the script and enjoyed it. They asked for his input. Yeah, I have not met him. I maybe will come bump heads with him at some point. What's really great about the fan community is when you go to conventions is where I usually meet other creators or other people. And some of the most amazing times that I've ever had is hanging out with other comic creators and waxing rhapsodic over their work. And they at first they think I'm being too effusive in my praise, but then they realize, no, it's just me. And it's great. Bill Hunt says the BBC's Sherlock is a perfect model for writing mysteries without telegraphing the ending. I agree with that. I really like Sherlock a lot. It's great stuff. Robert, since you got that new ST hot toy, I think that was Con that I post on Twitter. The Con hot toy, that was actually made by, it's not Hot Toys, it's made by QMX, which makes prop replicas, and they're doing Star Trek figures, and they've done Kirk and Spock and McCoy. They're coming out with Scotty. They've done Khan. They did the great 6 scale captain's chair. It's awesome. Mercer Create says, so maybe the little notches on the side of the saucers are deflectors for both the Enterprise and the Reliant, and the round circle is just sensors and communications. That could be. He's talking about the circles that are on the outside of well, actually, it's on this ship. Here's the Enterprise. There's circles. There's notches that are also sensors, deflectors. That could be. I'll buy that. Shallow Beast asks the eternal question, what are my thoughts on Star Trek Discovery? Anyway, so I love the commentary track by Braga and Moore on the Generations and First Contact discs. Yes, I do too. No, I'm sorry. I don't mean to make light. I feel that Star Trek Discovery does not serve the Star Trek franchise well. I don't understand why they have to go back and change the past. The character of Sarek, I think, is completely does not understand the way it's written. Way he's written in Discovery doesn't understand what's going on. The whole thing is a retcon. I don't know why they felt the need to do all of that. Now they're bringing on, Captain Pike, which they're going to just make even more different. I mean, one of the things about the Star Trek franchise, even Enterprise, even though it was a prequel, it was still new characters, new situations, and I think Discovery is relying way too heavily on a period of time that we've already seen that's incredibly well documented, and I wish they would go forward. But I'm hoping season 2 is good. We'll see. Have you seen the DS9 documentary, What We Left Behind? No, that was crowdfunded. Ira Bear, who was the creative force behind Deep Space Nine, made a documentary that was crowdfunded called What You Leave Behind. I can't wait to see it. Looking very forward to that. If you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything. Laugh out loud. Yes. I try not to be, I've been a very negative, outspoken negative voice when it comes to the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies and Star Trek Discovery. And it's not because I'm old, and it's not because, I'm too mired in what Star Trek was. What I want, again, are great stories well told. And I feel that the last 10 years of Star Trek has relied too heavily on conflict with bad, evil people that are one-dimensional. I mean, come on, if you will allow me, Nero, especially if you read the Countdown prequel miniseries. Nero has this mining ship that's full of Borg technology. He's mad because Spock didn't. It's not that the supernova that destroyed Romulus was caused by Spock. So he finds himself 85 years or 95 years in the past, when the first thing he should have done was fly to his homeworld and go, hey, in 95 years hence, there's going to be a supernova that kills my family and destroys the Romulan people. Why don't you start planning for that now? Any one of you out there, if you found yourself 95 years in the past, the first thing you would start to do is figure out, well, what can I do to, change the future and get a little cheddar for myself and my family, or maybe stop World War II. But Nero doesn't do that. And once he realizes he's in the past, and he just decides to go blow up Vulcan and destroy the Earth. He's an idiot, and I can't get on board. He's an idiot. Of course, then they wouldn't have a movie, but that's why I cannot stand the modern Star Trek films. They're monumentally dumb. Here's another example. So Anton Yelchin, Chekhov in the Star Trek universe, is just a Russian. He's just Russian. The fact that Walter Koenig has a funny, over-the-top Russian accent, the characters in universe don't think that Chekhov has a funny Russian accent. They're not going, oh, well, that's really an actor named Walter Koenig doing a bad Russian accent. He's just Russian. So the fact that in Star Trek 09, they saddle Anton Yelchin, who speaks, or rest in peace, he spoke Russian. He's from Russia. His parents brought him over from Russia. He is a native Russian speaker. The fact that they saddled him with a ridiculous over-the-top Russian accent to the point where the computer on the Enterprise doesn't recognize what he's saying breaks the fourth wall and was so ridiculous. And that's all you need to know about why I don't like those Star Trek movies. What is the best film of 2018? Will you make a top 10 list? I will, but I haven't seen. There's many movies I haven't seen. The Favorite, I haven't seen. Vice. There's so many films I haven't seen yet that I need to see. Harris asks, people say that Star Trek Beyond is the best of the J.J. Abrams trilogy. I don't think so. Star Trek Beyond, I love Justin Lin. I love the Fast and the Furious movies. They're definitely, whether I think they're awesome or guilty pleasures, I don't know, but I love them. And I was excited for Justin Lin to take over the reins. But that movie begins with Captain Kirk bored of his job. And he says that, I don't like this. In space, we'll never be able to discover everything. And what are we doing out here? I'm like, I tuned out. Screw you. You have no understanding, not Justin Lin, but screw the writers. They have no understanding of what and Simon Pegg wrote it. So I take it back. Don't screw the writers. But it was wrongheaded to make Captain Kirk this character that's like, I don't like being out here. Don't like that. Robert April says, but Rob blowing up Vulcan is cool. No, it's not. It's not cool. Star Trek died with Enterprise. Sorry, but this new stuff, although entertaining. David Wells says they aren't Star Trek. Rob, favorite TNG episode? You know what? I think my favorite TNG episodes, actually, on the Inglorious Treksperts podcast, we count down the top 50 Star Trek episodes of all time, starting, I believe, next week through the new year. We did, I think, it's 6 hours worth of shows on it. I think my favorite Next Generation two-parter is the 6th season Chain of Command, where Captain Jellicoe, Ronnie Cox as Captain Jellicoe, comes on board and takes control of the Enterprise, and Picard goes off on a secret mission and is then captured and tortured by Gul Madred. Gul Madred? I believe Gul Madred. Fantastic two-parter, great Star Trek. It has an incredible message about torture and why it's bad. It's Next Generation firing on all cylinders. But of course, I love Inner Light and Yesterday's Enterprise, Measure of a Man, especially the extended version, one of my favorites. Great stuff. You know what? I'm going to tell you something. Mercer Create says Orville is really a refreshing show. I had not watched Orville until 2 days ago, and I'm up to episode 5, and I'm loving it. It's becoming its own thing. I know it started out, it's an homage to Star Trek, but there's some really compelling. The last episode, the next episode I'm watching is The Krill. There was the episode about the Generations ship where the people didn't know. It was very much like For the World is Hollow and I've Touched the Sky, but it was really interesting. I'm really liking the Orville. I thought the humor would be off-putting because, there's a few one-liners I'm not digging, but it's character-based humor for the most part, and I'm really loving the Orville. Jeffrey Berry says, R&B, you rock. Love everything you do. Well, thank you. How about showing us your Hot Toys collection? There is a video on my YouTube channel, the Burnettwork, where I do show off my Hot Toys collection that was in my old office. It's not all my Hot Toys collection, and I keep adding to it, but it's some of my Hot Toys collection. And I love the way I had them displayed, which I don't anymore. But check that video out. Again, it's on. And you should subscribe. Subscribe so you know when these are coming out. Subscribe to the Burnettwork. Robert Bagass asks, when can we expect another Robservations episode? I've been so busy on the feature film that I'm producing and editing, Tango Shalom, but I've got like 3 episodes of Robservations I'm probably going to drop over the next couple weeks over the Christmas holiday, because the next episode is an interview with Diane Duane, which I did over Skype, and technically it's not the greatest thing in the world, but I always wanted to interview Diane Duane. I tell a funny story about what happened to me when I was reading her book Spock's World on the beach in Venice. So the next week or two, you're going to see that. And then there's going to be a succession of different Robservations episodes coming out. It's great. I had not seen Into the Spider-Verse. Reptar King asks, have I seen Into the Spider-Verse? Not yet. I'm probably going to see it later today. I can't wait. Everyone loves it. Everyone's saying it's the greatest thing ever. Megapod Tastic says, did you ever expect that in 2018 Dolph Lundgren of all people would be in not one but two major movies? No. And once again, I have to say, this is why we live in interesting times, because a guy like Dolph Lundgren is having the Dolph-assance or the Lundgren-assance, or the Renaissance of Dolph. That's great stuff. I actually met him once briefly. I was producing a horror film for Warner Brothers called The Hills Run Red in Sofia, Bulgaria, of all places. Back in 2008, we were shooting in the summer of 2008. He was working out in the gym one morning, just him. I walked in there, I'm like, that's Dolph Lundgren. And I went up and talked to him, and he was on his way to direct a film where he described it to me as Die Hard at a rock concert, where he was the director, but he was also playing the drummer of this band. Would I want to see a Borg origin story, Haskell 420 asks? I don't know. I mean, I think they've defanged the Borg. They've humanized the Borg too much, and they've defanged them. I don't know if there's a Borg story that I would want to see about their origin, but I'll tell you, there's a series of books written by David Mack called the Star Trek Destiny trilogy. Those 3 books are about the Borg coming back en masse. 7,000 Borg cubes show up in the Alpha Quadrant. Epic sci-fi, epic Star Trek, epic sci-fi. I cannot recommend the Destiny trilogy. It takes place post-Nemesis. Great stuff. You should read that. Jason Creed says, the problem I have with the new Star Trek movies is the issue with theme. Wrath of Khan was all about theme, death and how we deal with it, and aging and mortality. The new one's not so much. Absolutely. One of the things that makes Star Trek The Wrath of Khan such a great film is it is about how we deal with death. And that's what Star Trek always did. At its best, it was always delving into the human truths. And these new Star Trek movies, not so much, which is unfortunate. Even Space Seed is a great Star Trek episode, because you're dealing with a man who used to be, as he says, on Earth 200 years ago, he was a prince with power over millions. What's it like to have been that guy and then find yourself all alone with your 75 remaining people when time has passed you by? And you're still the same person, but the world, the universe indeed has changed. And that's why Khan is such a compelling character. And what happened to him is, so his fall from grace was really because Kirk never bothered to check on their progress. And here was a man that, if SETI Alpha 6 never exploded, what might SETI Alpha 5 have become? That's what Spock says at the end of the episode Space Seed. It would be interesting to come by and see what crop had sprouted from the seed you planted on this day. Yeah, it's great stuff. Robert April says, we don't need to see everyone's origins. I agree. I agree with you. Why? Daniel Yama says, I want a Mask movie. Mask, Mobile Armored Strike Command. That was a series of toys. You might get one. I know. I think that's Hasbro or something, and they're trying to make that. Who are some of your favorite underrated comic book characters? Well, everyone knows that watches Heroes. I love Moon Knight. Moon Knight is a second-rate Batman as he originally was created back in the late 70s, but I love the first Bill Sienkiewicz, Doug Mensch run on Moon Knight, especially the latter issues when it became a direct sale only book and they could add more violence, more adult themes. I loved Moon Knight. One of my favorite unsung comics is Atari Force. The 20-issue run of Atari Force was great. I love that. I desperately want to revive. I want to write a new Atari Force comic, and I want Jose Luis Garcia Lopez to draw it. Everyone thinks I'm crazy, but it's true. The actor for Teen Aquaman is really bad. Oh, come on, Raptor King. I don't know about that. We didn't see enough of him. Haskell 420 says, Borg, maybe they evolved from the V'ger-Decker Union. Well, there is a Star Trek novel called The Return. That is the second of William Shatner's Star Trek novels that he wrote with Judith and Garfield Reeves-Stevens, and they address that very subject. And it's very interesting. So yes, I agree with you. That is a good thing. Lincoln Wild says, I want a new Galaxy Quest. Well, there's supposed to be a new Galaxy Quest TV show in the works. I think that'd be great. Captain Robert April says, The Wrath of Khan was also dealing with characters who've known each other for around 20 years. Into Darkness, not so much. I know. Trying to retrofit Wrath of Khan into Darkness, it just didn't work. You also didn't know who Khan was. They didn't set up who he is. They never tell you anything about Khan in that movie. I mean, if I had made Into Darkness, it would have opened in 1996 with Khan and his followers getting into Botany Bay as the Allied forces are closing in, whatever the space launch site is. There's army, the armor's coming in, and they blast off just in the nick of time, and then it would cut to 300 years later when they're found by Peter Weller's forces or something. So you explain who these characters are, which you don't know anything about. Leonard Kennard says, if Aquaman pays off, can we get a Marine Boy movie? I would love that. Marine Boy was, if you know who Speed Racer is, Marine Boy came out around the same time. It's Marine Boy. Marine Boy was a Japanese anime brought to America from I want to say late 60s, early 70s. But yes, that would be funny. Let's see. Hands of Stone says, was hoping to get a Moon Knight series on Netflix, but sadly it seems that will never happen. Maybe, but you might see one on the Disney streaming service. I hope to see that. Megapodtastic asks, with Star Trek, how important is continuity? If I was handed the reins of Star Trek, how would you account for past continuity? Well, here's the thing. I grew up with the Star Trek continuity is my religion, basically. And yes, for the first 20 years of my life, the only Star Trek that existed was TOS. There was comic books and there were novels, but the TOS episodes were all that existed. And continuity was really important to me. There were these compilation books that came out called The Best of Trek that were just essays written by people about the Star Trek universe, and they would deconstruct everything and try and tie everything together. And to me, the Star Trek universe was a living, breathing place, the same way that Middle-earth, Tolkien's Middle-earth, has such continuity and such a rich history because he imagined it all. And that's what, to me, Star Trek was all about. And Next Generation played fast and loose with that continuity, but there was an effort made to create a holistic universe. And that was true for the first 40 years of Star Trek. And as some of you might know, I was involved with a fan film for a while called Axanar that made great effort to try and caress itself into the continuity of the Star Trek universe. I mean, what happened to that was unfortunate. And Bill Hunt, who was here in the chat board today, he wrote a fantastic screenplay based on the original work that was done by the producer on the show and on the movie. And we were hoping to make something that was caressed into continuity quite well, but Discovery took that all away. There's no real reason anymore to make Axanar because the story we were telling has now been rendered moot by Star Trek Discovery. Vesna asks, do I have models of all Star Trek ships, although I only care about the Enterprise? Well, here am I have so many Star Trek models. You can see there's the NX-01, there's the Defiance right there. I have more Star Trek spaceship models than anything. I've been buying them my whole life. I love them. But I agree with you. The Enterprise, the refit Enterprise from Star Trek: The Motion Picture is my favorite spaceship of all time. I love it. Robert is Thanos, a Star Trek fan. He stole his idea from the governor of Tarsus 4 from Conscience of the King. That is Bartholomew Omak. I love this name. Bartholomew Omak Dubhamina de Kanat. I can't pronounce that. I massacred that, but I love that. From what he's saying is there's a first season episode of Star Trek called The Conscience of the King. And young James Kirk, a 16-year-old James Kirk, was on this colony that was on a planet called Tarsus 4, and there was a blight that was destroying all the crops and a horrible famine, and everyone was dying. There was not enough food for everyone to eat. So Governor Kodos, who was the governor of Tarsus 4, decided that in order to save half the population, the other half would be put to death, would be executed, and they were executed. And then Starfleet showed up and liberated the colony, and then Kodos went into hiding, and his fate is shown in a Star Trek episode from the first season of the original series called The Conscience of the King. That's exactly what Thanos was doing, except on a universal scale. But yes, I think Thanos did, in fact, watch Star Trek, because after all, he knows who Tony Stark is. So why wasn't he enjoying the historical records of Star Trek as beamed into space? So yes. Movie Fanobi says, just join my Patreon. Best of luck. Now you don't have to ask me for your $2. I want my $2. Well, thank you, Movie Fanobi. I really haven't been paying much attention to my Patreon. I just set it up. But yes, any little bit, it helps. What I'm going to use any of my Patreon money for is to buy I need more lights for my Imaginarium where I'm shooting Robservations. It's my big set. It's not really lit yet. So anything that I'm also, people were asking me too. People were just sending me money when I started to talk about Robservations without me asking for it. They were PayPaling me money. So I started doing drawings for stuff when people are starting to send money. And I did 2 drawings. I did a drawing for the Long Shot miniseries, the original 1985 Ann Nesenti, Arthur Adams Long Shot miniseries. I took them out of my collection. They're mint. So in the first episode of Robservations, I gave away the original Blade Runner movie special that Marvel published, along with a book called The Cyberpunk Nexus. That's a collection of essays about Blade Runner that I contributed to this year that came out. So I gave those. I had those drawings for people that just donated things for me on PayPal, which is great. Now this time, I haven't really made much of it. And I didn't go online, but I'm giving away the entire run of Batman and the Outsiders from the 80s, which is one of the goofiest Batman runs ever, but it's great. It's awesome. Halo, Katana, Metamorpho, Black Lightning, Batman, drawn by Jim Aparo. So you can still get in on that. I said that drawing was going to end on December 1st, but if you want to donate to PayPal me, where you can look on the Robservations thing, but it's RM Burnett. PayPal me at RM Burnett. I'm going to draw in the second episode of Robservations, which I'm going to shoot the drawing on Tuesday. You can win the entire run from the 80s, mint condition of Batman and the Outsiders, which is an awesome run of Batman, but it's goofy as hell. So, but thank you for doing my Patreon. I will start doing more Patreon-only chats like this one. And then because, the only way to support these shows and what I want to do, I'm traveling. I'm going to places. In the first episode of Robservations, I was up in Seattle. There's places I want to go travel to, and the only way I can fund those kinds of things is via Patreon or PayPal. And if you guys have any ideas of people I should meet or places I should go, there's a husband-wife. There's a father-son team in the Netherlands that build Star Wars 6-scale sets, which are incredible. I think they're called Jazz Inc. is the name of their company. I mean, unbelievable, like 6-foot-long Death Star sets with 35-inch flat screens built in. Amazing. I want to go to the Netherlands and do a whole episode of Robservations on them. Basically, I want to figure out a way to get them to give me their free sets, but they're amazing. I don't think they could give them to me because there's so much work involved. You have to be over, Robert says you have to be over 1,000 subscribers to do a super chat. Well, I have more than that. But, I got to start. It's fun to talk to you guys without having, to ask for money all the time. But yes, John Campea, we do super chats. And the John Campea show, John has really upped the production value. He's partnered up with the Stream TV. But all of his money goes toward paying. He's got employees now. The production value on the John Campea show and the Weekly Hero has gone up only because of donations from people like you. And the super chat questions go a long way toward paying for that stuff. And I would rather do these chats on my set, where you can see, which is huge and surrounded by all my graphic novels and action figures and model kits, but I will get there. So thank you for all that. Mercer Create says, I think they only use the dish as a deflector with the next generation. No, I mean, it's called a navigational deflector. I mean, they've never really gone into it. In Next Generation, they famously turn the navigational deflector into a weapon to fight the Borg at the end of the 3rd season with Best of Both Worlds 1. Yeah, so that's what Mercer Create says. That's just what he just read. AK Channel TV says, you should meet John Campea. It seems like you guys would be great friends if you met. Well, John and I do a show together now. I've been doing the John Campea show. I was on Heroes with John Campea and John Schnepp back in 2015 and 16. So John and I have been doing our weekly show called The Weekly Hero that you should check out. That's all about comic book movies. We talk about Aquaman on Friday's episode. And then I've been doing his daily show with him in the mornings more and more. So I hope to do more of that because I really enjoy doing that with him. I love the energy Campea and I have to bounce off one another. What are your expectations for the Lord of the Rings Amazon series? I don't know, man. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, and the amount of money they've already spent $250 million just to acquire the rights. I mean, I think that they should go down and just film the whole thing in New Zealand because there's already an infrastructure there, and Weta Workshop's already built all the armor. There's so much I can't even imagine what it would be like to start up a new Lord of the Rings TV show from scratch. I mean, they should just go drop a bucket load of money back on Peter Jackson. He doesn't even have to be involved, but they should involve Weta Workshop and everybody down there. Flick Talk says, Rob, am I into Lego? Yes, I love Lego. You want to hear a sad story? I had all of the Lego Star Wars collector sets, but they were in my storage locker that got repossessed through no fault of my own, even though it was a fault of my own, but it was terrible. I want that $800 Millennium Falcon so bad. What was my first Daniel Yama asks, what was my first hot toy? I can tell you, I have it sitting. Check this out. You want to see my first hot toy? This was back when Hot Toys didn't have official licenses to make licensed figures. The very first hot toy I ever owned was this. George Lucas. This is a George Lucas hot toy, or as it was called, the Director. This is the very first hot toy I ever owned. I have them sitting here with my Bandai die-cast 6-scale R2-D2 and C-3PO that are two of the greatest Star Wars action figures ever made. They're die-cast. They're awesome. They're sitting right here. So yes, those are my first Hot Toys figures. First hot toy figure. Haskell 420 says, did I get chills watching the Godzilla trailer? Yes, sir. Yes, I did. I can't wait. Of course, I've known Mike Doherty for a long time, and we were in Australia together. I'm so excited that he took over the reins of the Godzilla franchise. Man, I can't wait. My favorite Godzilla movie is Godzilla vs. Monsters Zero. And then my favorite kaiju movie of all time is the original Rodan. But I like a lot of the 90s continuity Godzillas. Oh, can't wait. I can't wait. Daniel asks if I got the concept art Captain America Hot Toy. I have not. My Hot Toys funds have been a little light lately, only because I've been working on other projects and using my money to get some things going. I know Haskell 420 says, oh my God, a George Lucas Hot Toy. I know, but you can find him around. You can find him on, it's the Director, and you can find them on eBay. So in the TNG episode Measure of Man, what did the Enterprise actually do? It looks like they sucked out the atmosphere. That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know what they actually did. Jason Creed says, in the first Godzilla trailer, the beautiful music they play over Mothra spreading its wings behind the waterfall is stunning. Brilliant. Okay, that music is by a very famous French composer named Claude Debussy. Now, if you want to get a really, and that piece of music is called Clair de Lune. They also use that piece of music at the end of The Right Stuff from 1983, one of my all-time favorite movies. What's really interesting, there is a band, a electronic band, techno band, I guess you call it that, called The Art of Noise. And they were big in the 80s. They did a Max Headroom duet called Paranormia. They did a version of the Dragnet theme, I believe. But they did an album called The Seduction of Claude Debussy, which is one of my favorite electronic records. Get it. It's so good. But yes, that's what that music comes from. It's a real classical piece, Clair de Lune, Claude Debussy. You should check it out. It's great. Robert, have you noticed the vessels in the Godzilla trailer? They have a similar look to Federation starships, but of course not as large. Yes. Mike Doherty, the director, is a huge sweaty, so I can't even imagine what we're going to see in this movie. I can't wait. Flick Talk says, do yourself a favor and listen to the Dvorak Symphony 8 in G major. I will listen to that. I'm a huge classical musical nut. Clair de Lune. Yes. Gene Roddenberry says, great band. Would love to see you on the OneRing.net's weekly Tuesday show with Cliff Broadway. You know, the One Ring has been around for a long time now. And the party, when Peter Jackson won the Oscars, when they took that boatload of Oscars home for Return of the King, they went to the One Ring party afterwards. That was like the one party they really wanted to go to, which I thought was really cool. All right, folks, I am going to jump off the phone because, as I said, I'm going to go watch the Seahawks destroy the 49ers, and they will destroy the 49ers. El Narciso 3 says, do you think the soundtrack will suffer on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3? Probably, without James Gunn. I mean, the Guardians movies are such the James Gunn franchise. I don't know. I mean, maybe he already wrote that script. So if they use the script, maybe the music was already written into the script because it's such a vibrant part of the movie. But yeah. All right. Well, listen, thanks for joining in to this, the second live Burnettwork Robservations podcast. Thanks a lot. I don't know when I'll do another one, maybe next weekend. But until then, you can listen to the Inglorious Treksperts podcast, which I am on occasionally. And that a new one drops tonight about the Star Trek animated series. Look for me on the John Campea Show weekday mornings at 9 a.m. And also find me on the Weekly Hero with John, usually on Wednesdays in the afternoon, but sometimes we drop it later depending, because John has to do editorial on that show later. And any ideas you might have, subscribe to my channel, the Burnettwork. If you can support me via Patreon or PayPal, whatever, if you want to get in every episode of Robservations, I am going to be having drawings for cool stuff. And anybody who supports the show via PayPal or anything else, your name immediately gets entered into a drawing. You can enter as many times as you want. So thanks for all that support. This is a lot of fun. I'm going to end the stream now, and go Hawks. Yes.